Hello and welcome to CACUK's Legal Surgery for Friday the 24th of September 2021. Now this is actually a re-recording of a Zoom session that we did, which was more of an interactive session. So this is just the presentation part. And CACUK, that's CACUK, stands for Class Action COVID UK. Class Action COVID UK aims to bring a legal case against the UK government for the lockdown harms we have all suffered and are continuing to suffer. And Freedom Friday is part of CACUK's initiative to empower you on a personal level while we work on the big legal case in the background. So every third Friday of every month, CACUK will bring you a legal surgery to help and encourage you to know and assert your rights. And that's because it's one thing to know your rights, but it can be quite another thing to assert those rights effectively, especially when you are governed by an oppressive and unlawful regime, which is actively working to obfuscate your legal rights. So today's session, we will discuss vaccine exemptions. And this is based on the backdrop to this is that the UK government has recently passed legislation mandating vaccination for any person entering a care home unless they're exempt. And this is not limited to care home staff. So you could be a plumber, a hairdresser, or somebody employed by a local authority who may or may not be required to enter the premises of care home at any point in the future. Okay, so this legislation may be illegal, but until that is proven in the courts and the legislation scrapped, and until we can get medical mandates outlawed everywhere, forever, your personal immediate answer to these wrongful mandates lies in declaring your vaccine exemption. So in this presentation, I'll show you how anybody in this country can exempt themselves if they don't want to be vaccinated. And I do recommend that everybody in the country now considers following these steps because the care sector is merely the easiest target for government to attack first. In reality, we are all under threat from vaccine passports, otherwise known as mandatory vaccination. So just to introduce myself, I'm Mina Dew, and I started Class Action UK last October. I do have a law degree as well as a psychology degree, but I'm not a lawyer and nothing in this presentation should be taken as legal advice. I will present a general interpretation of the law only, and for personal legal advice, you should consult a lawyer. So the agenda for today, first of all, we will look at the actual legislation. And this is important because only the legislation can tell you what the legislation says. So we're going to go straight to the source. And I will show you how to search for legislation online and how you can interpret the words used in the legislation. So following this, we're then going to look at some guidance that the UK government has put out. And I will show you how this guidance appears to go over and above what the legislation says. And I'll explain why this is wrong. We will then look at a couple of letters, and one is an open letter to UK government officials, and the other is a template letter written by a group of lawyers, which you can adapt to meet your own needs and circumstances. And we'll follow this up by looking at some exemption forms, and these are simple and self-explanatory, and they're drafted by medical professionals, and you'll get the links to download them as well. And last but not least, we're going to look at the approach that you can take to make all of this knowledge and the tools work for you effectively. So to begin with, I'd just like to share with you the objectives for this session. So if you're watching this, then hopefully by the end of the session, you will have either understood something new about the law or you will have gained some confidence in asserting your vaccine exemption. And how do you know that you have achieved these objectives? Well, for instance, you may be better able to know where to look to find UK legislation. You may be better able to interpret the words used in legal language and what questions to ask when you're faced with legalese or guidance, for instance. And you may pick up a new phrase or technique, or you may simply leave with a feeling of new confidence, mission, or renewed energy in terms of tackling the situation that you now find yourself in. And one thing I'll just ask is, if you're here to get answers, is that you listen with your heart, because when you listen with your heart, your mind open, your eyes open, you should find the own wisdom from within to be able to tackle your situation. I can only give you a generalistic information, so I don't know exactly what you might be looking for, but hopefully you'll find something that helps you in this presentation. So without further ado, let's have a look at the Health and Social Care Act 2008, Regulated Activities, Amendment, Coronavirus, Regulations 2021. And we're going to click on this link to open up the legislation. Hopefully that will come up quickly. If it doesn't, it does. That's good. So we're going to go to, so this website here is legislation.gov.uk. If you are doing a DuckDuckGo search or anything like that, searching in your preferred browser and search engine, you can just type in legislation.gov.uk and it gets you here. And we're just going to put in the title of the document, which is Health and Social Health and Social Care. So they're just keywords, and I'm going to put in 2021. Okay, so that narrows down the search, because if you would just put in health, for instance, and searched, or if you would search for coronavirus, for instance, in this box here, you would have literally found hundreds of pieces of legislation. So this is the actual legislation itself. I'm going to click on that link to get you straight there. And this is it. So we see here the Health and Social Care Act 2008, Regulated Activities, blah, blah, 2021. And this is a really short piece of legislation comparatively. It's only 6 pages, and you can actually just view the whole thing online. I always prefer to look at, so this is the whole instrument. I prefer to download the PDF because it's just it's easier on the eye, it's easier to read, and that just opens up straight away, and it's going to open up in Acrobat Reader. So here it is. So what do we need to know about this? Let's have a look at the title first of all. So the Health and Social Care Act 2008, Regulated Activities. I'm just going to quickly brief you through what this all means. So you'll see in brackets. So first of all, the fact that it says 2008, that means in 2008, there was an Act of Parliament, see the word Act, called the Health and Social Care Act, and it was brought out in 2008. Now, the word regulated activities, the fact that that's in brackets should tell you that regulated activities are defined in the Act, which is that one there. You'll see here, 2021, that tells you that these are regulations, not an act. So regulations are a secondary legislation, as opposed to primary, as opposed to an act, which is primary legislation. And primary legislation trumps secondary legislation. So these are just regulations, 2021, and you can see that it says amendment here. And what you find is that this 2021 regulations actually amends former regulations which were made in 2014. So here's the chronology. You've got the Health and 2008, you've got a Health and Social Care Act. 2014, you've got regulations made under that Act pertaining to that Act. 2021, you've got even more. You've got an amendment to those regulations, and that's all to do with coronavirus. Okay. So I'm actually going to close this, because I'm going to take us straight down to section Regulation 5, and that says Amendment of Regulation 12 pertaining to safe care and treatment. So when it says Amendment of Regulation 12, it's talking about Regulation 12 in the original regulations, which was the 2014 regulations, okay? So it's amending Regulation 12, and it's saying, because Regulation 12 in the original regulations just had 2 paragraphs, and it's saying after paragraph 2, just insert all of this stuff here. So you're basically amending it to add in new bits and bobs. And this is paragraph 3. So we're going to look at the wording, and I'm going to talk to you about the meanings of the words. So this is the bit you want to look at for the proposed vaccine mandates or the vaccine coercion. It says, for the purposes of paragraph 2H, a registered person, and by the way, a registered person is defined in this Act, in this regulation, and you'll see it there. So this is how you look when you're reading stuff. Always look at the words. If there's something that you go, oh, what's a registered person then? Right? You should be asking yourself that, and then you go and you find out where that's defined. And you know it's defined in the original regulations because it says paragraph 2H, and that means the previous regulations. So person A is actually, the registered person is actually the care home manager for the purposes of this one here. And it says person A must secure that person B does not enter the premises unless, and then it's got a range of conditions. Okay, so let's say I'm the care home manager. You're person B entering the care home. Let's say you're a care home worker that works in the care home, and you're coming now to come into the care home to work, but I can't let you in unless I've made sure that you've either provided me with evidence that satisfies me that you've been vaccinated, which you haven't, or that for clinical reasons, you shouldn't be vaccinated with any authorised vaccine. And we can also, if you do a control find, you see, you look at authorised vaccine. And you'll see that's defined right here as well. So everything's defined, okay, in a piece of legislation. And if it isn't defined, then we use the dictionary definition. Okay, so legal definitions are specific and sometimes a little bit different from what you think they are in the dictionary. And if they are different, then they have to be defined in the actual piece of legislation itself. So here you've got registered person. Okay. So you've got to provide me with evidence, and the evidence has got to satisfy me that for clinical reasons, you shouldn't be vaccinated with any of these COVID vaccines, okay? Now, what do they mean by clinical reasons? And what do you mean by, what do you mean by evidence? And what do you mean by satisfied? So if we look up if we do a control find and search for the word evidence to see if they tell us what they mean by evidence, we will see that it isn't defined, okay? It's not defined. It comes up in the legislation, but it's not defined. For instance, so to compare, if you were searching for registered person in this, I've already got it up here, you see? So these are in every act or regulations, you'll see something called, I'll scroll up, see, interpretation. And you look for something that says interpretation, and it tells you all these terms that they're using in this document. They define exactly what they mean by that. And in this one, they don't define evidence. They don't define clinical reasons. So we have to use the recognised version of what clinical reason is. I've also highlighted reasonably. I'm not going to talk to you about what that means, but it's a separate study area really, because it's a really interesting word in law. All I'm going to say is the registered person provided with the information as evidence in accordance may process that information. So that tells you that I've given the care home manager some evidence. Now, what evidence could that be? Let's say, for example, I've got a doctor's note, and I say, look, I've got a doctor's note, I've got this condition, and I shouldn't be vaccinated, I'm exempt. And the care home manager says, let's say, for instance, for argument's sake, let's say the care home manager is on your side and is not really wanting to sack you for not having a vaccine. So she or he says, okay, that's fine, I'm satisfied with that evidence or with that exemption that you've provided me. Okay, so the care home manager has absolute discretion to decide what satisfies him or her in terms of your evidence. So you don't have to satisfy the government. You don't have to satisfy Boris Johnson or Sajid Javid or anybody else or the CQC. You have to satisfy only the care home manager that you are exempt. Okay, and they have discretion. And then they may process the information, and may is different from must. Anytime you see must in legal text, it's a legal requirement. When you say may, that's permitting you. So she may process the information, but she doesn't have to. And then also it says nothing in this regulation authorizes the processing of personal data in a manner inconsistent with any provision of data protection legislation. So the GDPR applies. It applies to the processing of your data, the storing of your data, and the consent, your consent or non-consent to storing of your data. So all of that applies. So that is what the legislation says. That's all it says. Okay. Now, I think I've covered everything there. I might have to come back to bits and bobs. I'm just quickly. So now you know what the legislation says. And you know what it doesn't say. It's very minimal in terms of what it prescribes. What I will say actually is, I just want to go back. The thing about, the thing about legislation is it can't override your existing rights. It can't contravene existing laws. So in English law, you have absolute bodily autonomy and bodily integrity. You decide, it's very well established in this country and in all Commonwealth countries, you decide what shall and shall not go into your body. This is evidenced by case law and very recent case law as well. So if a regulation or act came out contradicting that, it would actually be invalid. It would be null and void. And, you know, either the whole of that act or legislation would be null and void, or the parts of it that contravened your rights and contravened the previous, existing law. So that is the reason I'm going to say why this actual piece of document that we just looked at is so minimal and it's very open to interpretation. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the interpretation that the government has decided, and this is guidance provided by the UK government. So we've got a letter to care home colleagues. Dear care colleagues, it's sent to the local authority chief executives, directors of audit, adult social services, care home providers and care home managers. And it says temporary medical exemptions. This came out on the 15th of September. Regulations were approved, blah, blah, blah. Incredible efforts of people across the care sector to encourage and reassure colleagues about vaccination. We're working as quickly as possible to ensure that those who are not able to get vaccine for medical reasons, they say, are not disadvantaged. We'll have a look at what medical reasons and clinical reasons are, and you'll be surprised. So who is exempt? Right? It tells you who is exempt. It gives you a list. So I'm now going to show you... So when I read through this, I quickly made some notes actually for myself. And these are my notes on this wonderful piece of guidance from our government. So I'm going to show you how I look at stuff, and it may help you. I'm just going to get the controls there, make it a bit bigger. So hopefully you can see it. So government guidance. So let's look at the wording of this guidance. Now, in this guidance, there is a phrase that says self-certify that they meet the medical exemption criteria using the forms attached to this letter. So they've got specific forms attached to this letter, and there have been a lot of questions, a lot of queries about this. And then it says, once the NHS COVID Pass system is launched, so they're tying up this form and the process of exemption with the NHS COVID Pass system, essentially, COVID certification or a form of vaccine passports, which, as we all know, does breach GDPR in terms of if you don't have to consent to that information being processed or stored. So once it's launched, it says care home workers will need to apply for a formal medical exemption through that process, they say, right? The questions you need to be asking yourself. Need to apply appears to have no legal foundation or justification. So need to apply doesn't mean must apply. Do you remember I said if it says must, that's a legal requirement. If they say need to apply, you actually don't. You're not legally required, okay? And then so there's kind of questions you can ask yourself. Well, who says they need to apply? Who says I need to apply through this formal process? What are the consequences if I don't use this formal process? What laws would I be breaching if I used a different exemption form? And does the UK government actually have authority to insist that you use a particular form to exempt yourself? Well, it doesn't say so in the legislation, does it? No. So ask yourself that question. Compare need to with must in legal language. And what are the consequences? Because remember, the onus was put on the care home manager. So a big requirement is put on the care home manager as this authorised person. So they're under a duty. And care home managers, I can tell you, are fretting over this. So what are the consequences for a care home manager if you wish to accept an alternative form that isn't the UK government's prescribed form, which isn't prescribed in the legislation? Is a form even required? Is it enough evidence to turn up at your place of work and say, hey, Bob, you know I get migraines, I have a peanut allergy, there's been reaction, there's been anaphylactic shocks as a result of these vaccines. I'm really worried. I would like to declare an exemption. Now, who's to say that that isn't evidence? Because in the legislation, it didn't say written evidence, did it? So if your manager knows you very well because you've worked there for 20 odd years and they know you have certain medical conditions, who's to say you can't just turn up and declare your exemption, and the evidence will be you turning up and them knowing that you have a condition. So this is how we can interpret things in legislation if it's completely open, and it is. So as I said, the regulations give the manager discretion over what evidence they accept. And this letter that I'm talking about, this one here, this UK government letter to these chiefs, it can't change it. Okay, so by going over and above what the regulations require, it's just creating bureaucratic rules and processes, and these may not be legally enforceable. So we're going to look at some alternative exemption forms in just a moment. Oh, and it says this temporary self-certification will expire 12 weeks after the NHS COVID Pass system is launched. And then the other thing it says is when it talks about exemptions, who is exempt, this list is not exhaustive, and examples of medical exemptions from COVID-19 vaccination could include. Not exhaustive and could include means that you can potentially add any reasonable exemption that applies to you, okay? Because it's your body, only you know what you must be exempt from because you know your body's reactions to various things over the course of your life. Nobody else knows that. Boris Johnson doesn't know that. So not exhaustive, anytime you see not exhaustive, just say to yourself, other things can be added. And when you say could include, say to yourself, well, it could include these, but it also could include other things. And you see that you can just add anything that you think is reasonable. And the same applies, by the way, if you go to the government's website and search for masks, scroll down to where it says exemptions, and you'll see, again, a non-exhaustive list of potential reasons why you could be exempt from wearing a mask. It's completely non-exhaustive. You just self-declare. Right, so let's close that down. Let's close that down for a moment. And then where am I going to go next? I'm going to go to, okay, so this letter that we've just looked at also references operational guidance published on the 4th published on the 4th of August. And it's being added to, so it's being updated. And this is 49 pages of the government's interpretation of the legislation. It's an interpretation only, and it's guidance. So I won't go through it because it's packed full of, again, lots and lots of obfuscation of your legal rights. So let's close that down and close that down. So the key points here: guidance is not law, and guidance cannot override legislation. I've actually proved that on the CACUK website, there is actually a post about, just search for nursery. There's actually a post on there where I have, I proved this point, that guidance is not law, and I challenged my daughter's nursery when they closed down for a positive asymptomatic PCR test. And they tried to close it down, and I said, well, are you going to refund the fees that I paid for this 10-day period? Oh, no, we can't do that, they said, because we're following the government's guidelines, they said. And they said, you'll see in our terms and conditions that when we have to close for reasons beyond our control, we don't reimburse you. So, of course, I wrote back and said, well, you say it's not beyond you. You say it's beyond your control, but were you following guidance or were you following the law? Because if you were following the law, then please can you tell me exactly, can you point to exactly what law or legislation you're following? If it's guidance you were following, guidance isn't law. So therefore, the onus is on you as a business owner to make a decision whether to close or to not close. You've made a decision to close. I'm not going to say whether that was the right decision or the wrong decision. However, you made the decision. The decision was not beyond your control. It was wholly, completely within your control, and therefore you will now reimburse me. And you'll see, I did post an update to that, and I did get the refund of fees. So that proved that guidance is not law. Okay, so you can use this anytime you wish. Anytime somebody's saying, I'm following guidance, we've got to do this. No, you don't have to, because it's guidance. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of letters. And the first is an open letter from the Legal Advice Network, and this contests the legality of requiring vaccination as a condition of employment. The second one is a template letter, which is something that you can adapt and you can actually send to your employers. So I'm going to open up. Let's have a look at this one first. All right, so this is a Legal Advice Network. Their details are there. Their email address is there. And this letter was written and sent in July, I think. And here is who it was sent to: Sajid Javid, Minister for Health, Minister for Care, the Vaccines Minister, Parliamentary Understate Minister for COVID Vaccine Deployment. So all the relevant people have had a copy of this letter, including the CQC, which is the Care Quality Commission, which oversees the kind of the regulating body for care homes, and Care England as well. So regarding the requirement, so 26th of July, regarding the requirement for care workers to be vaccinated. So we've had an unprecedented number of inquiries from care workers. We've now referred to the legislation, which is just what you've now referred to the legislation. You've seen it for yourself with your own eyes, and to understand what the law provides. This letter is a summary of the law. It's really short, this letter. And they have referred in this letter to the 2021 regulations, which you've just seen, and the 2014 regulations, which I just showed you as well, very briefly. Okay. And they say Regulation 12 states, they're talking about Regulation 12, they're talking about the amended regulation. Okay. So number 3, this is what we just looked at. And they're going to talk about first the first part. So paragraph 5, subparagraph 3B1, and that says B has been vaccinated with a complete course of doses of an authorised vaccine. They're going to say why that's wrong. And to prove that that's wrong or unenforceable, they refer to the Parent Act, which is the Health and Social Care Act 2008, which you've just seen, and another act, which is infamously known as the 1984 Act, Public Health Control of Disease. and they refer to various sections of those acts to say 45E, section 45E in that act says, under medical treatment, regulations under 45B, 45C may not include provision requiring a person to undergo medical treatment. So you cannot enforce medical treatment on a person, is what that act actually says. And by medical treatment, which you cannot enforce, you've included vaccination of the other prophylactic treatment. That means you can't make laws mandating vaccines for anybody. So it says 12.3b1 is unenforceable because the provisions of an act take precedence over the provisions of a regulation. So remember, an act is primary legislation and regulations are secondary legislation. Primary legislation trumps secondary legislation. So an act trumps regulations, okay? So clinical reasons for not vaccinating. And then they go on in this letter. This bit here, which we just looked at, which is what applies to you if you're watching this. For clinical reasons, B should not be vaccinated with any authorised vaccine. And they've looked at, and they've basically said, look, you've been pushing vaccines for the last X number of months, and you've never explained that you've never tempered that advice for everyone to be vaccinated by explaining that there will be valid clinical reasons for not being vaccinated. So loads of people have already rushed out and got vaccinated, probably when they didn't want to. They said this is disingenuous of you to do this. And they've said now lots of people, lots of care workers will have been felt coerced to vaccinated, harassed. They will have left their jobs because they didn't want to get a vaccine. And a proportion of these workers will be clinically exempt. And actually, I would go so far as to say anybody who felt harassed or coerced or left their job because they didn't want to get a vaccine, I would say not a proportion, but all of those workers will have been exempt. And you'll see why in a moment. So, and they will have been caused harm by coercion, harassment, and loss of income. That's the harm that they've been caused. Next steps, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's that letter. I'm going to close that down now because we don't need that anymore. And the next one I'm going to show you is the template letter from the COVID-19. So this is published on the COVID-19 Assembly. This letter is written, I understand it's been written by a group of employment lawyers and other lawyers who've collated and pooled their expert knowledge together for you to create this. And again, I'm going to just get this one. This is actually quite long. It's 7 pages. And again, so I have, Dear Sir, Madam, vaccination of care home staff. I write to you in connection with a proposal to require, I don't know, Mary to show proof of her vaccination status. So it's written in a sense of somebody writing to your employer on your behalf. But you can just amend this. You can copy and paste it into Word. And when you copy and paste it, I think there's references in this as well. Do copy the references too. Let's see them. Okay. So I'm going to scroll down to the bits that are highlighted. So here, the right to decline treatment is a human right of bodily autonomy, which no person, including the government, can trespass on without there being exceptional circumstances relating to a lack of capacity. Declining vaccination amounts to a clinical reason why a care home worker should not be vaccinated. Okay, so clinical reason, they've said a clinical reason includes declining vaccination, and they've explained why. My client requires you to accept a self-exemption. And they've referred to the NHS COVID Pass and the website, the NHS websites, which says, among other things, if your customer confirms that they have a self-declared exemption but is unable to show evidence, you should allow them access to your venue or event. You must not ask for proof of their medical exemption, and it is not essential that they show any form of exemption card at any point. They've referred to the processing of data, which I showed you previously as well. And they've referred to vaccination without consent is assault and battery. And they've looked at the meanings of informed consent being voluntary, informed, and capacity. The relevant factor here is voluntary. Because if you're not voluntarily getting a vaccine, that's not informed consent. Intimidation, they've referred to intimidation. I'm skipping through this quite fast because there's so much to get through here. And, you know, you can read this in your own time. You've got the link now. Okay, so that's that. So that's the template letter. And actually, we've got a new one here, which I'm just going to show you. And this one here is actually it's more recent. And I understand, I think this one is published by PJH Law. And I understand this is being put together by PJH Law and another lawyer or law firm. And this is one that this came up in the CACUK support Telegram group. So I've gone and read all of this because, and actually I've actually recorded a separate recording, just reading through all of this and explaining it. So I won't go into too much depth here, but this is a really long one. And the main part of the letter is just a few pages, which explains the law and explains what this is something that you would send to your employer who is imminently trying to dismiss you for not vaccinating. So it's basically a last resort kind of letter. It's pretty strong. And on top of this letter, you've got so you've got 4 pages of letter. Underneath here is something that your manager is required to sign. And then underneath that, you've got a summary of claim, and that's another sort of, 10 pages or so, 10, 13 pages or so. And it goes into real depth about all the law pertaining to, informed consent and coercion and things like that, and what constitutes battery and assault. And it basically backs up your argument in the letter that you will not be vaccinated and you will not be coerced to be vaccinated, and that is a clinical reason why you shouldn't be vaccinated. It satisfies the legislation. So that's so as I say, yes, I have done actually a separate recording of that one, which I'll share in the Telegram group as well. So that's that one. So finally, okay, so we're going to go to exemption forms. Now, if you remember, the UK government tried to say that you've got to have a specific type of exemption form that they have put together, and that's temporary only. And then when this, after the NHS COVID pass system has gone live, then your temporary exemption expires. I don't know how you have an exemption for a vaccine. You're exempt from a vaccine because you can't be vaccinated because you've got some medical reasons, and then that expires. What does that even mean? Your exemption doesn't expire. You're either exempt or you're not exempt. So they say that it expires after 12 weeks, and then you've got to go through the COVID pass system, which is, it's linked to track and trace or vaccine passports and what have you. So no, the legislation doesn't say that. So here are some exemption forms, and these have been put together by medical experts. And this is the link. And you can just go to promic.info. So Promic stands for Professionals for Medical Informed Consent and Non-Discrimination. Okay, so exemption forms there. I'll just make that bigger. And I'll just enlarge that so you can see. So if we scroll down, we'll scroll down here, and there's a little video to explain. And then you've got 3 versions of an exemption form. And this one here is one that you can self-declare. And this one here is that you can take this to your doctor, medical professional, to declare for you. And this one is for under 16s. Now, if we have a look at, I'm going to open up this one. So it's a really nice form. It's got everything on there, and it tells you all that, and it says as the undersigned health professional. Now, remember that there was nothing in the legislation that said that you've got to have a doctor verifying your exemption. It didn't say that. So that means it's not necessary and it's not required by law. However, you might feel if you do have and some doctors will refuse to sign this, so you can use your self-declared exemption. But if you have an agreeable doctor who is on your side and is interested in your health over and above what the government is coercing it to do, and we all know that doctors are encouraged with money to get everybody vaccinated. So if your doctor is not one of those and is looking after your health, there's no reason why they shouldn't sign this, because it's got a number of reasons why you shouldn't be vaccinated. So, for instance, you've got a family, medical history of allergic or anaphylactic reactions. You've got autoimmune conditions, which, as many of us will already know, that autoimmune conditions are actually introduced by vaccines. Clotting, bleeding, COVID vaccination is contraindicated. And we've got a medical history of chronic fatigue syndrome, medical history of neurological inflammatory disease. You've acquired natural immunity because you've previously had COVID-19. And the person is using evidence-based health or medical measures to protect oneself from others from infection by SARS-CoV-2. So you're taking your vitamin D, you're taking your zinc, you're taking your quercetin, you're taking your echinacea, your aloe vera, and whatever else you take to boost your immune system, and your vitamin C, and you're living a healthy lifestyle. You're not obese, you don't smoke, you don't drink too much, and basically you're living a healthy lifestyle. You get lots of sunshine, and so therefore you're using all these evidence-based health or medical measures to protect yourself and others. So your doctor can say, in that respect, you don't need to have a vaccine, and they sign it there. Yes. So that's a really nice form, and you can use that, and you can download those from there. All right. Okay, so here we come to the good bit. Now, this is the approach. So how to decline a medical intervention. So in general settings, and this isn't limited to care homes, I'm going to talk to you about the process of declining a medical intervention, because lots of people have been coerced, not just care home workers. Lots of people have been told to be vaccinated. So the first step, so you've got 5 steps here. The first step is obviously the verbal conversation. And if that's not accepted, you say, I don't want to have the vaccine, I don't want to wear a mask, blah, blah, I don't want to be tested. You then go on to have informal written correspondence. So you send it in an email, you explain in an email, I don't want to be vaccinated because blah, blah. And they refuse again. So then you go to formal written correspondence. And so this is just an example of formal written correspondence. It's fairly short, and you can go to the CACUK website and have a look at that. If that's refused and they're still pushing you, then you can proceed to a letter before claim. And a letter before claim is essentially something telling the person that if they now still keep on refusing, the next step will be possible legal action, which would be a court claim. And the aim of all of this, when you are conversing with people, is to reach an agreement obviously without having to go to court. Now, in terms of the conversation with your GP, so again, if you do feel more comfortable getting a health professional declared exemption rather than just giving your own, perhaps perhaps it'll just be a bit easier for you to do that, and it's save a lot of hassle. The first step is obviously obtaining an appointment. You've got to choose your doctor. So you don't have to just go to any doctor. If you have a doctor at your surgery which you feel is just a little bit more compatible with you, ask for that doctor in person. You might have to wait a little bit longer to get an appointment. I waited weeks to get an appointment with my doctor. But I know that particular doctor that I asked for has always had my back in the past and has helped me and listens really well and actually cares. And I know that doctor actually cares. And so this is the kind of doctor that you want to go to get your exemption form signed, okay? Now, some people find it easier talking on a telephone, and most appointments are telephone these days. And some people find it easier going face to face, and I do find it easier face to face with people because I can watch their reactions and I can talk to their reaction to what I'm saying. So you can have this more, you can read their body language and things like that. So you can see what to say next and when to stop or what not to say. So you've got to navigate this this conversation, and do use all of the kind of usual techniques of using you're adapting your body language and your attitude and things like that. And we talked about this in the actual Zoom session, so I won't go into it too much detail here because it's more of a personal thing really. So keep it personal. Don't go in and say, oh, there's no evidence of this. So keep it personal to say why you don't think you want to be vaccinated, and keep to the point. You might want to give your doctor some additional resources to look at, and the Dr. Tess Laurie's letter, which is you can download it here. So Dr. Tess Laurie's letter to the MHRA is excellent, and it's a really coherent view on the COVID-19 vaccinations and the side effects and the adverse reactions that had happened to that date, which was July. And that's great because that's obviously written by a doctor, and doctors like to listen to other doctors. They're more likely to take seriously another doctor's opinion or view as opposed to a layperson. And what to do when you're getting nowhere. If your doctor just flat out refuses to sign your exemption form and says, no, I don't agree, that's an exemption. Well, do you know what? Go back to your self-declared exemption. Do that because you don't need the doctor to declare your self-exemption. It's not required by the legislation. The legislation doesn't say that a medical doctor has to exempt you. You declare yourself exempt, right? So if your doctor refuses, just say thank you for your time, doctor, and walk out. All right? Or you'll find another doctor, and there are doctors who will sign it. So now you've got your exemption. It's either going to be a self-declared exemption or a medical professional declared exemption. Now you're going to go to care home manager, and you're going to make sure that your care home manager accepts that as your evidence of not just temporary exemption, permanent exemption from all future vaccines that you don't want to have, right? So I'm going to go back. It says refer to slide A, so I will do. So you're going through these steps, obviously, the same steps you're going to go through with your manager. So you probably already had a verbal conversation. You might have already had some email correspondence. Now, you might not know what to do in terms of formal written correspondence and the letter before claim. So that COVID-19 assembly letter and the one that I showed you, the last one that I showed you, are kind of the formal written correspondence, and that's when you're really pushed against a wall, and they're just saying, no, you're not exempt. You can't be exempt, and I don't accept it. So that's the process. And keep in mind, care home managers. There was a really interesting presentation that I was shown to watch, and it was presented to. It was targeted to care home managers by a legal firm. It went through the legality of sacking people for not having a vaccination, and you could see that the legality was actually very, very questionable by what this lawyer was saying. And it actually said they recommended that these people actually seek legal advice, because it's very clear. It was very clear to these lawyers who were doing the presentation that it's really not a black and white area there. So care home managers are under pressure. This is all new ground. Lawyers are still finding their way around this. Care home managers have no idea what to do, what the law is. The CQC will be navigating. Obviously, they've had letters sent to them from various lawyers and representatives. So I just want to encourage you watching this, if this applies to you, that the law is on your side, it appears, and you're in a position where you can educate your care home manager. So navigate that conversation and actually CACUK, one of CACUK's Freedom Fridays, on the second Friday of the month, we do a special session led by a vocal embodiment facilitator. She's a voice coach, basically, and she does a session on how to navigate difficult conversations. So that might be a really good one to attend if this is something that you want to look more into and you're worried about having these conversations. So at this point, when we discussed this in the Zoom session, we would have had some time to have questions and share our struggles or share any kind of, I love to hear success stories. So this is what we would do if we were having this in a Zoom session. So do come along to the next legal surgery, which will be the third Friday of October now, and I think that's the 15th. And I'm just going to return to the objectives that we set out. So have you understood something new about the law? I hope you have. Have you gained any confidence in exerting your vaccine exemption? And I hope you have, because I hope that you've seen the actual legislation that I've shown you how to find online and how to read. We've seen that legislation essentially says that anybody in this country can have a vaccine exemption for any reason whatsoever, okay? Because it doesn't, the regulations do not prescribe or limit why you might be exempt. They do not prescribe how you can communicate your exemption. They only say that a registered person is required to check your vaccine status or exemption. So there you go. So hopefully you will have, and it's how well you understand and know your legal rights really fuels your ability to be able to have these conversations and to assert your rights. So, okay, this is one thing I've just added actually, because I had a chat with the lawyer who works for is behind Workers for England Union. That's Robin Tilbrook, and this is the Workers for England Union are working hard to help people in care homes, well, actually help anybody to assert their vaccine exemption. So it's not just limited to care homes. They're working with everybody and anybody, and you can join the union. I suggest you go and have a look at their website, which is workersofengland.co.uk, and decide whether that union is for you. I know that what they're doing is they're training their representatives specifically in these issues of the vaccine laws and exemptions, and so they can sit with you in meetings with your employers. They can draft letters for you, and they also have exemption forms, but they're not publicly available. However, the exemption forms I've shown you on the PROMIC website are there for anybody to download. And there's another one called the Legal Advice Network, which is headed by Edward Lowe. And if you remember the letter that I showed you first, which was the open letter to Sajid Javid and various government officials, they have created a kind of union as well. I'm told that's not a registered trade union, whereas the first one is. And this is their website, so you can have a look at that and find out and decide if that's something that you wish to subscribe to. The UK Medical Freedom Alliance is an excellent group of medics who have been working so hard to produce resources, and it's specifically related to informed consent. So you can have a look at their wealth of resources on informed consent. Their Lawyers for Liberty are also a group of lawyers and have been writing public letters to the UK government. They have an excellent letter drafted regarding the school vaccination rollout, so that's there as well. And if you want to have a look at the CACUK website, there is a newsletter that we send out, and you can subscribe to that. Just go to join us. And there is a Telegram channel, which these presentations and information and things like this will be posted on the Telegram channel. So if you join that, you can always access any kind of resources through that. And I personally can help a very limited number of situations. And obviously, I can't help everybody. My time is really stretched because I do run my own business, which is a separate business. So I'm doing that, and also I'm working on the legal case as well. but in a limited number of instances, I may be able to help somebody personally in a professional capacity. And if you want to talk to me, you can email me at hello@cacuk.uk. You can tell me about what's going on, and if I think I can help, I'll let you know. If I can't help you, I'll let you know as well, and maybe suggest somewhere else that you can go. So we've got some sessions coming up, and for October, we've already had the Namyo Harange Kyo session for 1st of October. So Freedom Friday sessions, we have 3 separate different groups. On the first Friday, we focus on spiritual empowerment, so personal empowerment, and that's because this is a spiritual war. It has been said by some of the top lawyers in the world that this is a spiritual war we're fighting. So obviously, the first port of call to empower ourselves must come from the deepest level of our own life and our body, our own soul. So this session is set up as a spiritual empowerment session. Now, the second session, the second Friday of the month, the next one is this Friday coming, the 8th of October. And this is the one that I mentioned earlier, which is called Difficult Conversations. So it's about harnessing the power of your own voice. And this is led by, let me get this right now, Vocal Embodiment Facilitator. This is Cordelia. She's absolutely wonderful. She's an awake human being, and she is very good at, she can even talk to you about how vocal techniques help and improve your immune system, for example. So she does a workshop which is 90 minutes. It's an interactive session, and you can actually work with Cordelia in a group environment on this. It's an excellent session. So, and the last session we talked about what to do when things get heated in a conversation. So there'll be a different focus each month. The 15th of October is the 3rd Friday of October, and that's again going to be the legal surgery, how to know and assert your rights. I'm pretty certain, unless something really urgent comes up, that we're going to be discussing the school jabbing agenda and what you can do about that, because this is obviously a huge concern for so many people across this country. And it's essentially the same issues where, it's a lack of education on the part of the headmasters, headmistresses, head teachers, and people are following guidance and not the law. So we're going to look at what's the resources that are available there, and we'll talk to you about how you can maybe manage that situation. And if you've enjoyed this and you would like to see more, you can go to the CACUK website, cacuk.uk/join-us, and you can just subscribe to the newsletter, and then you'll always be kept informed of any future sessions and things that we're doing, and any new posts that we put out. So, and also, if you found that this was helpful to you, if you would like to contribute to the class action case, the place to go is donorbox.org/CACUK. And every donation is so gratefully received. We haven't been doing a big push for this, but we have been receiving some donations, and I would just like to thank everybody who has donated so far. And I also want to say that, so the funds that we receive are go towards building a legal case, getting that case in the courts, getting the best legal help and advice. Everything that's been done so far has been done for free. And also we'll be using those funds for awareness raising campaigns as well, because obviously we've got to raise awareness of the issues that the case is based on. Okay, so and if you can't afford to donate money, you can donate a prayer, a meditation, a strong wish, anything that you think will help us to succeed, and just give us your strong determination that we will succeed in this case. So I would like to thank you for your attention, and I'm going to say see you next Friday. Do bring a friend, spread the word. And if you do want to have a copy of the slides and resources, I'll put them into a Dropbox, and you can email me at hello@cacuk.uk, and at some point I'll be able to, when I get time to sort everything out, I'll pop them in a Dropbox, and if anybody wants them, they can have access to the Dropbox and they can just download all the stuff. Okay, so thank you very much, and see you next time.